The alarm rang before the sun came up. He opened his eyes slowly, already tired, as if he had not slept at all. The small apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the old refrigerator. For a moment, he stayed still, staring at the cracked ceiling, gathering the strength to move. His body hurt in places he did not want to think about yet. When he finally sat up, a sharp pain ran through his side. He pressed his lips together and breathed through it. He had learned how to do that over the years. Make no sound. Show no weakness. Especially not now. He swung his legs off the bed and stood carefully. The mirror across the room caught his reflection, and he looked away at first. Then he forced himself to look. Dark marks were already forming on his arm and along his ribs. He pulled his loose shirt down to cover them. Long sleeves. He would wear long sleeves again today, even though the weather was warming up. From the next room, he heard a small cough. His daughter was awake. He moved quickly, forgetting the pain for a second. She was sitting up in her bed, rubbing her eyes, her hair sticking up in every direction. When she saw him, she smiled, wide and sleepy. "Gad," she said. "Morning," he replied, keeping his voice light. He bent down and hugged her gently, careful not to let her press against his sore side. She did not notice. She never did. He helped her get dressed, made a simple breakfast, and packed her school bag. He moved slower than usual, but he turned every movement into a routine so she would not ask questions. Kids notice more than adults think. While she ate, he stood at the counter, holding a cup of coffee he barely touched. Every time he shifted his weight, his body reminded him of last night. He pushed the memory away. Today was not the day to think about it. After walking her to the bus stop and watching until the bus turned the corner, he let his shoulders drop. For a few seconds, he leaned against the fence and closed his eyes. Then he straightened up. Work was waiting. The bus ride to the office felt longer than usual. Every bump in the road sent a small wave of pain through him. He kept his face calm, eyes focused on the window. People around him talked, laughed, scrolled on their phones. No one noticed him. That was fine. He preferred it that way. At work, he arrived early, as he always did. The building was quiet, lights still dim in most offices. He liked these minutes of silence. They made him feel in control. He sat at his desk and logged in, his fingers moving on the keyboard like nothing was wrong. Emails, reports, numbers, things that made sense. Things that followed rules. As more people arrived, the noise grew. Chairs moved. Phones rang. Someone joked loudly near the coffee machine. He kept working, head down. "Hey, you okay?" A coworker asked while passing by. "Yeah," he said without looking up. "Just tired." The question did not go any further. It never did. Later in the morning, his boss walked past his desk. She slowed for a second. He felt it before he saw it. That pause, that quiet attention. When he looked up, their eyes met briefly. "You're early," she said. "Always am," he replied. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on him a moment longer. Not in a way that made him uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Then she moved on. He exhaled slowly and went back to his screen. As the day went on, the pain became harder to ignore. Reaching for files hurt. Sitting too long hurt. Standing too long hurt. He adjusted, adapted, kept going. He had no choice. Around noon, while others went out for lunch, he stayed at his desk with a sandwich he brought from home. He ate with one hand, the other resting still on the desk. He did not join the conversations. He never did. His mind drifted, against his will, back to the night before that had started like any other evening. He had left work, picked up groceries, and walked home. The street was poorly lit, the kind of place people passed through quickly. Ahead of him, voices grew loud. Angry Dot, he saw a man cornering someone near a closed shop. Words turned into shoves. No one else stopped. People crossed the street or pretended not to see. He should have done the same. He knew that. He had a daughter at home. He had responsibilities. He was tired, but his feet kept moving. "Hey," he had said, his voice firm but calm. "That's enough." The man turned angry, surprised. Things escalated fast. Too fast. He barely had time to react before fists were flying. He did not fight back much. He just tried to shield the other person, to create space. Eventually, the man ran off, leaving him alone on the pavement, breathing hard, body aching. The stranger he had helped thanked him quickly and disappeared into the night. He stood there for a long moment, checking his ribs, his arms, making sure nothing was broken. Then he picked up his groceries, one bag torn, and walked home. He had cleaned himself up quietly so his daughter would not wake. He had winced in the bathroom, gripping the sink, telling himself it could have been worse. Back at work now, he shook the memory away. Thinking about it would not change anything. In the afternoon, his boss called a short meeting. He sat through it, listening, taking notes. At one point, he shifted in his chair and could not hide the small wince that crossed his face. She noticed. Her expression did not change, but her eyes narrowed just slightly, as if she was filing something away. When the meeting ended, she stopped him. "Can you stay a minute?" "Sure," he said, heart beating faster for reasons he did not fully understand. She closed the door behind them, not in a dramatic way. "Just enough to keep the noise out. You've been quiet today," she said. "I'm always quiet," he replied with a small smile. She did not smile back. "You're also hurt?" He stiffened. "I'm fine." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "If you say so." She did not push. Instead, she said, "If you need anything, let me know." "Thank you," he said, already turning toward the door. When he left her office, his chest felt tight. Not from pain this time, from something else. Being seen, even a little, felt strange, uncomfortable. By the time the workday ended, he was exhausted. He packed his things slowly and headed out, blending into the crowd once more. At home that night, after his daughter was asleep, he sat alone at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet again. He touched his bruised arm gently and stared at the wall. Tomorrow would be another day. He would get up. He would work. He would take care of his child. He did not know yet that the next morning would be different. For now, all he knew was how to survive the night. The night before had been a blur, but it was impossible for him to forget. He had walked home carrying the groceries, the plastic bags cutting into his palms, every step making his bruised side throb. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows over the uneven sidewalk. He kept his eyes on the ground, careful not to see too far ahead. Every corner held a potential danger, and every sound made him tense. He had been coming home from work, tired and thinking about the week ahead, when the shouting started. A man was yelling at someone smaller, and his first instinct was to ignore it. It was not his problem. But then he saw the smaller person flinch, trying to back away. Fear shone in their eyes, and he couldn't turn away. He had never been the kind of person to leave someone in trouble. He approached slowly, his voice steady. "Hey, leave them alone." The man turned toward him, face twisted with anger. He was bigger, stronger, but his anger was blind. The situation escalated quickly. Words became shoves, shoves became hits. He tried to protect the smaller person, putting himself between them and the man. His arms and shoulders took the brunt of the blows. He did not fight back hard, only enough to create space and hold the man back. When it was over, the man ran off, leaving him standing there, breathing hard, feeling every bruise forming. The smaller person thanked him and disappeared into the darkness before he could ask anything. Alone, he gathered the groceries he had dropped and walked home slowly. Every step hurt, but he moved steadily. Reminding himself that he had done the right thing. At home, the apartment was quiet. His daughter was asleep, her small breathing filling the room with comfort and calm. He leaned against the doorframe for a moment, just looking at her, feeling both exhausted and relieved. He set the groceries on the counter and carefully placed the food where it belonged. Every movement was measured, slow, careful not to aggravate the bruises on his arms and sides. The bathroom mirror revealed the marks more clearly. He touched his arm gently, feeling the warmth under his fingers. Some of the bruises were already dark and tender. He winced but did not cry out. He cleaned up, rinsed his face with cold water, and wrapped a small cloth around his side for support. Alone, he allowed himself to feel the pain, if only for a few minutes. He thought about calling someone, maybe a friend, just to talk. But he stopped himself. He had no one close enough who could understand without judgment. He had been alone for so long, raising his daughter by himself. Asking for help felt like a weakness he could not afford. He had to be strong. He had to stay in control. He remembered thinking, as he sat on the edge of the bed, that he had never felt so aware of his own vulnerability. Being hurt, being responsible for someone else, and being unable to let anyone see the cracks, it was heavy. But he could not let it show. His daughter depended on him. She needed him to be strong, even when he didn't feel strong at all. He checked the clock. It was late. Too late to call anyone. He moved to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank slowly. Every sip made his throat feel rough, as if the dryness had settled deep inside him. He sat down at the table, staring at the wall, trying to organize his thoughts. He thought about work, bills, his daughter's school projects, the small things that never ended. Life felt like a continuous wave of responsibility, and there was no time to rest. Eventually, he lay down, careful with his movements. He had learned to manage the pain so it would not disturb his daughter. She slept peacefully, unaware of the sacrifices and struggles that defined their everyday life. He envied her innocence sometimes. It was a privilege he no longer had. Sleep came in short bursts. Every time he shifted in bed, the bruises reminded him of last night. Every sound outside the apartment made him tense. He dreamed briefly of the street, of the man's angry face, of the smaller person running to safety. When he woke, the memories lingered, fresh and sharp, but the pain in his body was the real reminder. He could not ignore that morning came slowly. He sat up, holding his side, taking deep breaths to calm himself. He got dressed carefully, choosing long sleeves to hide the bruises. He did not want anyone at work to ask questions. It was easier to smile and act normal than to explain what had happened. Most people would not understand. He made breakfast quietly, preparing food for his daughter and himself. Every movement required patience. Even opening the fridge door or reaching for a pan sent jolts of pain through his body. He forced himself to ignore them, focusing instead on the routine that kept life moving forward. When his daughter came into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, he smiled at her, hiding the discomfort behind a mask of calm. He asked about her sleep, what she dreamed, and helped her get ready for school. She did not notice the bruises, the weariness, the tension that clung to him. She only noticed her father, present and steady, as he always was. After seeing her off to the bus, he leaned against the fence for a moment, closing his eyes, letting the brief quiet wash over him. Then he straightened up, gathering himself for the day ahead. Work awaited, bills awaited, life awaited. There was no pause button. On the way to the office, he reflected on the night before. He thought about the fear he had felt, the instinct to act, and the consequences. It had been worth it, he knew that, but the cost was clear. Pain, exhaustion, and a sense of isolation. Yet he also felt a quiet pride, a satisfaction that he had done what was right when it mattered most. Arriving at work, he went through his usual routine. He logged in, checked emails, attended meetings, and worked on reports. He moved with care, mindful of his bruises, aware that even small movements could cause discomfort. Colleagues chatted around him, their voices blending into background noise. He focused on his work, keeping his personal struggles to himself. Throughout the day, he felt eyes on him. He caught brief glances from coworkers, subtle hints of curiosity, concern perhaps. He smiled politely, continued working, deflected questions with a simple, "I'm fine" or "just tired." It was easier to maintain the illusion than to explain. His boss noticed more than anyone else. She observed him quietly, without comment, taking mental notes. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the slight hesitation in his movements, the way he carefully covered his arms with long sleeves. She did not confront him immediately. Instead, she gave him space, waiting for the right moment to offer support. By evening, he was drained. The office lights seemed harsher than usual, the chatter louder, the tasks heavier. He packed his belongings slowly, mindful of each step. Pain and fatigue accompanied him, but he kept going. There was no other choice. Walking home, he thought about the night, about the responsibilities he carried, about the quiet moments that defined his life. Every step, every decision, every sacrifice shaped the reality he lived in. He arrived at the apartment, relieved to see his daughter safe and asleep, and allowed himself a moment to breathe. He sat at the kitchen table, reflecting on the day, on the night before, on the endless cycle of work, care, and responsibility. Life was hard, exhausting, and sometimes unfair. But he had done what needed to be done. He had protected someone, taken care of his daughter, and faced the challenges that came his way. As he prepared for sleep, he felt a small sense of accomplishment. He had survived another day, managed another night, and continued to stand for those who depended on him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he would face them. Just as he always did, quietly, steadily, with a strength that went unseen by most, but was undeniable in its impact. The next morning, he woke with a stiffness that reminded him of the previous night's struggle. Every movement brought a reminder of the bruises forming across his body, a silent testimony of the chaos he had faced. He stretched carefully, trying not to aggravate the soreness in his sides and shoulders. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of the heater. And for a moment he just stood there, breathing in and out, gathering strength to face the day. He prepared breakfast slowly, focusing on the routine that brought normalcy to their lives. Every movement was intentional, every step measured to avoid aggravating the pain. His daughter stirred, still sleepy, and greeted him with her usual cheerful smile, completely unaware of the events of the night before. Her innocence made him both grateful and protective. He wanted to shield her from everything, from the bruises, the fear, and the weight of being alone. After breakfast, they went through the usual morning routine. He helped her pack her school bag, ensured she had everything she needed, and walked her to the bus stop. Watching the bus pull away, he felt the familiar mix of relief and exhaustion. Then he turned to face the day ahead, knowing that work would be both a distraction and a challenge. At the office, he moved through the familiar rhythm of his job, logging into his computer, opening emails, reviewing documents. He focused on tasks that required precision and patience. The physical pain was there, a constant undercurrent, but he pushed it aside to maintain professionalism. He had learned long ago how to hide weakness and carry on, especially when no one else could understand the battles he fought outside of work. Throughout the morning, his boss watched him quietly. She noticed the slight winces when he shifted in his chair, the careful way he reached for objects, the subtle tension in his shoulders. She didn't comment immediately, choosing to observe and understand first. In her experience, some people needed space before they could accept help. She valued his work ethic and his dedication, but something about today made her pause. There was a quiet strength in him, but it was shadowed by pain that he tried to conceal. He worked through lunch at his desk, quietly eating the sandwich he had brought from home. His coworkers chatted around him, laughter and casual conversation filling the room. He smiled when necessary, but mostly he stayed focused on the tasks in front of him. Participation in small talk felt heavy today, as if it required energy he didn't have to spare. Around mid-afternoon, his boss called a brief meeting. He walked into the small conference room, heart beating slightly faster than usual. She greeted him calmly and gestured for him to sit. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. She didn't speak immediately, letting the silence stretch just long enough to create a feeling of attention without pressure. "I noticed you've been quieter than usual," she said softly. Her voice calm but attentive. He shifted slightly in his chair, trying to maintain composure. "I'm just tired," he replied, keeping his tone light. He didn't want to admit the truth, didn't want to reveal the events of the night before. Vulnerability was a luxury he couldn't afford. She nodded, understanding without needing all the details. "I also noticed some bruises," she said carefully. Her tone wasn't accusatory or prying, only observant. He looked down at his hands, trying to hide the momentary hesitation. "I'm fine," he said firmly. "Nothing serious." She studied him for a moment, eyes gentle but unwavering. "If you say so," she replied. Then she added, "But if you ever need help or someone to talk to, know that you can come to me. You don't have to carry everything alone." The words struck him unexpectedly, not because they were profound, but because they offered acknowledgement without judgment. She wasn't trying to solve his problems or ask for explanations. She was simply offering a safe space, a lifeline that he had rarely allowed himself to consider. He nodded quietly, unsure of what else to say. He left her office with a strange mixture of relief and unease. It was comforting, in a way he hadn't anticipated, to be seen and recognized without having to explain himself. At his desk, he exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair and allowing himself a brief moment to breathe. The day seemed slightly less heavy now. The afternoon dragged on, filled with the usual tasks, emails, and meetings. He moved carefully, mindful of the soreness in his body, but he maintained focus. Every so often, his boss glanced his way, her gaze acknowledging his effort and quiet endurance. He didn't need words. The recognition itself was enough. Later, when he stepped out of the office for a brief walk, the sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows along the streets. He walked slowly, taking deep breaths of the cool air. The bruises ached, but the day's tension seemed lighter than usual. The brief interaction with his boss had given him a sense of support he hadn't realized he needed. As he returned to the office, he reflected on the contrast between the chaos of the previous night and the calm professionalism of the day. He had faced fear, pain, and physical struggle, yet he had also experienced quiet acknowledgement and understanding. The balance between these extremes reminded him of the complexities of life. Strength wasn't only about enduring hardship silently. Sometimes it was about accepting small gestures of care and trust. By the time the workday ended, he was exhausted, but not in the same heavy, aching way as before. There was a subtle warmth, a feeling that he was not entirely alone in navigating life's challenges. Packing his belongings carefully, he prepared to leave, mindful of the bruises, but also aware of the support he had been offered. Outside, the evening sky was painted with soft colors, a reminder that even ordinary days could hold moments of quiet beauty. Walking home, he thought about the events that had brought him to this point. The night of confrontation, the morning routine, the quiet office interactions, they all formed a chain of experiences that shaped his perspective. He realized that strength and vulnerability could coexist. That recognition didn't always need words. And that support could be offered without judgment or expectation. At the apartment, he found his daughter waiting for him, her small smile brightening the room. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that despite the challenges, he could face each day with a combination of resilience and openness to care. He prepared dinner, helped with homework, and listened as she recounted her day. Her laughter and chatter filled the apartment, providing comfort that made the bruises and fatigue seem less significant. Before bed, he sat quietly, reflecting on the day. The physical pain would not disappear overnight, but the acknowledgement and subtle care he had received gave him a sense of hope. He had learned something important, that moments of understanding and quiet support could carry a weight far beyond any words. They could heal in ways that action alone could not. As he lay down to sleep, he allowed himself to feel the mixture of fatigue, pain, and relief. The bruises were a reminder of his courage, and the day's subtle gestures were a reminder that he was not invisible. He drifted into sleep with a sense of balance, ready to face whatever the next day would bring, carrying both his burdens and the quiet knowledge that he could be seen, even if only by one person, and that alone made a difference. The morning arrived quietly, with a soft gray light filtering through the blinds. He woke slowly, aware of the soreness still lingering from the previous night's confrontation. Every movement reminded him of the bruises forming on his arms and sides, but he had grown accustomed to moving carefully, adjusting his body to protect the most tender areas. Despite the pain, he felt a strange sense of anticipation that he couldn't quite name. He went through the familiar routine of making breakfast for his daughter. She shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes and yawning, and he greeted her with the same gentle smile he always wore. He hid the discomfort behind the calm, measured movements, not wanting her to see the small signs of last night's struggle. Her laughter and chatter filled the apartment, and for a brief moment, he forgot the aches and the stress that clung to him. After seeing her off to the bus, he lingered in the kitchen for a moment, sipping coffee and feeling the quiet stillness of the apartment. Today felt different somehow, though he couldn't quite place why. He knew he had work to attend to, but there was a subtle shift in his awareness, a sense that the ordinary could become extraordinary with the right gesture. Arriving at the office, he moved through the early morning crowd, nodding to coworkers with polite acknowledgement. He went to his desk, logged in, and began reviewing emails and reports. The routine was familiar and comforting, a predictable structure that allowed him to maintain control even when the body ached. As the day progressed, he felt the usual weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Tasks demanded focus, and meetings required careful attention, but he noticed small differences in the way his boss interacted with him. Her glance lingered a little longer, her questions carried subtle concern, and there was a quiet warmth in her tone that hadn't been there before. He felt seen in a way that went beyond the professional. It was not intrusive, not judgmental, simply acknowledgement. Around mid-morning, he felt a light tap on his shoulder. He turned to see her standing there, carrying a small tray with a cup of coffee and a plate of breakfast. His eyes widened slightly in surprise, a mix of disbelief and gratitude washing over him. "I thought you might need this," she said softly, placing the tray on his desk. "You've had a rough couple of days. Don't think you have to power through everything alone." He blinked, unsure how to respond. The gesture was simple, ordinary even, but it carried a weight he hadn't anticipated. For years, he had managed every challenge by himself, never asking for help, never expecting kindness without conditions. And here it was, offered freely, without judgment or expectation. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice quiet but genuine. He felt the tightness in his chest ease just slightly, replaced by a warm, grounding sense of connection. She gave a small nod and a brief smile, then moved on to her own office, leaving him with the food and the silent acknowledgement that he mattered. He took a deep breath, savoring the small breakfast and the simple act of care. He ate slowly, mindful of the bruises and discomfort, but more aware of the unexpected comfort. It was a reminder that even in difficult times, human connection could provide strength and relief. Throughout the rest of the morning, he felt a subtle shift in his perspective. The work remained demanding, the responsibilities heavy, but the gesture of kindness lingered, like a soft light in the corner of a room. He found himself moving with a little more ease, smiling at small things, noticing details that previously went unnoticed. He thought about his daughter, about the way her small joys and laughter made the hardships manageable. He thought about the night of struggle, the fear and the pain, and he realized that the simple act of being seen and supported mattered as much as any physical strength he could muster. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to accept the notion that he didn't have to shoulder everything alone. The rest of the day unfolded in a series of familiar tasks, but his mindset had shifted. Each email answered, each report reviewed, each interaction with colleagues carried a lighter, more grounded energy. He moved through the afternoon with a quiet satisfaction, the small breakfast acting as both nourishment and reminder that kindness existed, even in the most ordinary places. When the workday ended, he packed his things and prepared to leave, feeling the subtle fatigue that came with long hours and lingering soreness. But the exhaustion was tempered by a sense of connection and acknowledgement. As he walked through the office, he caught a glimpse of his boss in the hallway. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave him a nod of understanding, a silent reinforcement that she had noticed, that she cared. Returning home, he felt a renewed sense of perspective. Life remained challenging, the bruises still tender, responsibilities ever present, but the small act of unexpected care had altered his day in a meaningful way. He realized that strength was not only about endurance, but also about allowing oneself to be supported, even in subtle, simple ways dotted the apartment. He found his daughter already working on a small art project. She looked up and smiled, and he smiled back, feeling the warmth of home and family grounding him. The bruises, the pain, the stress, they were still there, but for the first time in days, he felt a quiet lightness. The world hadn't changed, but his perspective had, and that made all the difference as evening settled. He prepared a simple dinner, shared conversation and laughter with his daughter, and felt the weight of the day ease gradually. When she finally went to bed, he sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on the morning's unexpected breakfast, the subtle acknowledgement, and the human connection that had restored a sense of balance. He realized that sometimes the smallest gestures carried the most profound meaning. Being seen, being acknowledged, and being cared for, even in ways that seemed ordinary, could heal more than effort or strength alone. And with that thought, he allowed himself to rest, knowing that tomorrow might hold new challenges. But he had experienced something that gave him quiet, enduring strength. The morning after the unexpected breakfast, he woke feeling lighter than he had in days. The soreness in his body was still there, a reminder of the struggle he had endured, but his mind felt clearer, more grounded. The small gesture from his boss the day before lingered in his thoughts, and he realized how much it had shifted his perspective. Being seen, even in a quiet, simple way, carried a weight far greater than he had expected. He prepared breakfast for his daughter with calm efficiency. Each movement was careful, mindful of his bruised body, but the tension that usually accompanied these routines felt less oppressive. She entered the kitchen, rubbing her eyes and greeting him with her usual smile. And he returned it genuinely, feeling a warmth he had not felt in a long time. After seeing her off to the bus, he lingered in the quiet apartment for a few moments, reflecting on the past few days. Life had been heavy, filled with struggle, responsibility, and pain. But he realized that strength was not about facing challenges alone. It was about resilience, yes, but also about accepting care and connection when it came his way. Arriving at work, he felt the usual weight of tasks and deadlines, but today it was tempered by a subtle confidence. The acknowledgement from his boss the day before had left an imprint, a reminder that he was not entirely alone in navigating life's difficulties. He moved through emails, reports, and meetings with a sense of calm determination, aware of the small strength he now carried within himself. Throughout the day, he noticed the small gestures around him more than usual, the friendly nod from a coworker, the subtle warmth in conversations, the rhythm of the office life that carried a quiet familiarity. The breakfast had been more than food. It had been a bridge, a reminder that connection and care could exist even in professional settings. By afternoon, he felt a renewed energy. He approached tasks with focus and patience, interacting with colleagues in a way that balanced professionalism with quiet openness. He realized that acknowledging support, even in subtle ways, allowed him to perform better, to manage his responsibilities with less tension, and to feel a sense of balance he had thought impossible. As the workday ended, he packed his belongings carefully, mindful of the bruises, but also aware of the inner shift he had experienced. Walking home, he reflected on the past week, the night of confrontation, the exhaustion, the hidden pain, and now the quiet, unexpected gestures that had reminded him of the strength found in human connection. At home, his daughter greeted him with a cheerful wave. They spent the evening together, sharing dinner, conversation, and small laughter that filled the apartment with warmth. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to relax fully, knowing that he had support, even if it came in subtle ways. He felt the tenderness in his role as a father, the joy of connection, and the comfort of being seen without judgment. After putting his daughter to bed, he sat quietly at the kitchen table. He touched his bruises gently, acknowledging the physical pain, but he also acknowledged the inner shift he had felt. The morning's breakfast, the attention, the subtle gestures of care, they were small, but their impact was profound. They reminded him that resilience and vulnerability could coexist, that strength was not solely in enduring hardship, but also in accepting kindness and understanding. He reflected on the lessons he had learned. Life would continue to present challenges, responsibilities, and moments of pain. But he now understood the power of connection, the importance of being seen, and the quiet strength that comes from acknowledging care. He realized that every small gesture, every act of understanding, could create ripples that changed the course of a day and even a life. With a deep breath, he leaned back, allowing himself to rest. The bruises would heal, and the struggles would continue, but he now carried a sense of balance, awareness, and quiet confidence that would guide him forward. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he felt ready. He had been seen, supported, and acknowledged, and that knowledge gave him strength beyond the physical, a strength rooted in the human capacity for care, connection, and understanding. He closed his eyes, letting sleep come naturally, feeling the gentle reassurance that life, even with its difficulties, held moments of unexpected grace, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could make the biggest difference.